Hello everyone, this is Venom, and we are back for another Destiny 2 video. Today we're going to be going over some weapons you're going to be using for your builds for Grand Masters. These are going to be some very common weapons you're going to be seeing using Grand Masters, because they're either A, really good weapons to use in general, or B, because they have intrinsic anti-champion mods on them. So we're going to go ahead and get through that list now. There's going to be quite a few weapons on here. I'll try to get to them quickly. Most are going to be exotic weapons, some are going to be legendary, and most of those are going to come out of the actual Grandmasters themselves, or at least a couple of them are. So let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to start with the big one. This is probably the most popular weapon I see used in Grandmasters. This was not very popular when it was released, but thanks to Bungie's rework, this thing now has anti-barrier on it, hits super hard, and was actually still capable of one-shotting red bars in Grandmasters, which most weapons cannot do, and that is going to be the Wishender Bow. Like I said, when this was originally released, this was not a very good weapon. It was popular in PvP because it could see through walls, and that was about it. That being said, because of its rework, it is now able to one-shot barrier champions and Grandmasters, so that means it'll also one-shot barrier champions no matter what you're doing. And like I said, it is one of the few weapons, excuse me, especially primary weapons, that don't take special heavy ammo, and is still capable of one-shotting red bars and Grandmasters. So even if I don't see somebody, or even if we're doing a Grandmaster and I don't see that it's going to be like a one with a barrier in it, it's going to be like overload and unstop. If I see somebody bring this into it because it's so strong, I would not bat an eye. It's that good of a weapon. And I'm fairly certain, again, I don't know for sure, but I'm fairly certain it's probably the most popular weapon for Grandmaster. So, the Wishender comes out of the Hunter's Remembrance quest. If you don't have some of these exotic quests, and they're from older seasons or anything, or like older expansions, you can get these at the exotic quest kiosks. But as I'm going through, I'll kind of list off the quests for all these exotics that come out of any kind of quest. Now, next up, this is a new one from Season of the Wish. This is going to be the Witchkeeper Bow. Now, this bow does not have any intrinsic anti-champion mods on it. However, because you can actually suspend enemies with it, that suspension does actually stun unstoppable champions. So it both does and does not have the ability to intrinsically stop unstoppable champions. It does, but you have to power it up first. For those who don't know, it says precision hits and final blows build energy towards a Snare Weaver arrow that can be fired from the hip. On impact, Snare Weaver arrows create a pattern of traps that suspend nearby enemies. Basically, get 7 headshots or get a few kills. Hip fire this weapon, it's going to put down a trap on the ground, and any enemy that walks into it is going to get suspended. Suspending enemies stuns them if they're unstoppable champions. So, like I said, this one I would count as an unstoppable weapon. This is, like I said, a new one. It comes out of the Star-Crossed mission in Season of the Wish, which is what we're currently in. It's a very good one to get, so go ahead and pick it up if you haven't got it already. Now, before I show up the next weapon, I want to actually show you something before I actually show off what it does. So, I want to actually show that here, if you look on your main menu here, it actually shows what different keywords will actually intrinsically stun some of the champions. And you can see here that Stasis actually has 2 that it can do. For slowing on Stasis will actually overload an enemy, and then I believe that shattering it will hit it with unstop. Now, of course, barrier will also, it doesn't list anything for barrier, but frozen enemies can't put the barrier up. So technically speaking, Stasis can stop all 3. I say that to bring you this next weapon. We've got the Ager Sepor. Now again, this does not have anything intrinsically in it, but it is a stasis weapon that is capable of freezing enemies. This is going to be a very good one to use with a stasis turret warlock, because the super is not going to be great. You can use this one and still kind of stop every single champion out there. Now, it's not going to be great at barriers, but like I said, frozen enemies can't put up barriers anyway, so you're already going to be very strong at stopping those. Now, I don't believe the quest is up for this one right now, so I believe this one you purchase directly from the exotic kiosk. Next up, before we had the Wishender, we had the Arbalist. And I don't mean when we got him, I mean when we started using him. So the Arbalist has intrinsic anti-barrier capabilities to it. Back in the day when we still had match game, it could also one-shot through any shield type. The Wishender was not able to do that. We haven't really used the Arbalist in a while just because match game has not been a thing. So really, Wishender is going to be the better choice using a Grandmaster over Arbalist in pretty much every single scenario. Like I said, back when match game was a thing, or if it ever comes back, Arbalist was stronger just because of the fact it could get through those elemental shields. But because elemental shields are not really an issue in Grandmasters anymore, there's no point in using an Arbalist which uses special ammo versus a Wishender which uses primary ammo. So infinite ammo, which can still be used, it'll be your main workhorse, versus something that can only do, I think, 23 shots. So Arbalist is pretty much fallen out of favor because of that. Now, it's still used for DPS phases for a lot of different bosses. However, for Grandmasters, it's basically not used anymore. Next up, we've got a kinetic sniper rifle. This one is the Isagi's Burden. This, with the Catalyst, is an extremely hard-hitting weapon that is still sometimes used for Grandmasters. It is not used nearly as much as it used to be. It did get a slight nerf, I believe. There's still a lot of other better options you can use for this one, but there are still some people that use this just for the fact that they can do a lot of damage because of its Catalyst. But, again, it's not going to be one that's going to be used a ton, but you still see it every once in a while, so that's why I add this one to the list. The quest for this one is no longer available, so this is going to be one that's bought from the kiosk. Next up, we've got another kinetic weapon. This one's going to be the Operate Perfected. This is a pulse rifle. It says this weapon creates SIVA nanite swarms on rapid hits and precision kills. Basically, getting precision hits with this is going to make nanites that are going to help you do more damage and attack other enemies. Now, for the UVET, you can see I have not got the Catalyst on here. I could have had it a long time ago. I just was not a huge fan of pulse rifles. Ignore that. This is still a pretty popular one to use for Grandmasters just because you're not only going to be doing damage to the enemy you're attacking, and it doesn't just proc on kills, it procs on precision hits, and it's going to attack other stuff for you while you're doing that. So that's why it's a popular one, especially if there's any kind of anti-champion pulse rifle mods for it. So the Operate Perfected is a very popular one. This is, again, another one that is no longer has a quest for it, so this is going to be one you can buy from the kiosk right now. Next up, our next primary slot is going to be the Quicksilverstor. It's an auto rifle. This one has no intrinsic anything on it. However, this is basically two weapons in one because it is a auto rifle, and you can also load grenades into it, or it will load grenades into it as you get hits with the weapon, and you can then do massive damage to enemies even in Grandmasters. Now, this is not one, like I said, that has any kind of intrinsic anything on it, but is a very popular one to use for strand builds, and is very popular to use because of the fact you can use grenades with this. It's got a grenade perk on here. It says, landing multiple rockets loads a grenade. Press R or hold R to switch into grenade launcher mode. So it's basically like you have 4 weapons instead of 3. So it's a very, very popular one to use, especially, again, if there's any kind of seasonal artifact mod that revolves auto rifles. So the Quicksilverstor can also be bought at the kiosk and with also a pre-order bonus for Lightfall, I believe. And next up, we've got the Malfeance. This is a hand cannon that has intrinsic unstoppable on it. This is a hand cannon that you actually get from the quest, the Darkness and the Light. This is a Gambit hand cannon. Now, this is another one that got a bit of a rework. This one actually will explode on enemies after it gets so many rounds shot into them. It actually says it shoots tainted slugs that burn combatants, stacking enough slugs causing them to explode, stunning surviving combatants. It's strong against unstoppable champions, and also does additional damage to taken enemies, so keep that one in mind. In fact, here's the perk right here, Taken Predator, bonus damage against taken enemies and Gambit invaders. So this was a Gambit weapon, still is a Gambit weapon, that's how you get it. The quest is for Gambit, and this does a lot of damage against taken enemies. And in fact, there are certain builds that actually do a ton of damage using this weapon as a primary way of doing damage. So, again, the Malfeance is a very good one. It's a fun one to use, and currently the quest is still active for this one. So go ahead and hop into Gambit and pick this one up. Finally, an example of a legendary weapon you can use for this one. This is actually the Hung Jury SR4. This is one you actually get out of the Grandmasters. This is the adept version of it. You can get the regular versions of this during regular Nightfalls. I've got the adept version out of the Grandmasters. The rule I currently have on here is great for Grandmasters. It's got shoot to loot, and it's got kinetic tremors. You're typically going to be staying far away from your enemies when you're doing a Grandmaster. So shoot to loot's going to be excellent. It's actually saved me many times picking up heavy ammo like that. And having kinetic tremors on here also helps do damage to enemies around too. So it's not just the rifle itself, but these rolls that actually are really good for the weapon. So it's just an example of a legendary weapon you can use. It's not one that's exotic. I did want to give some legendary examples as well. And it's the one that fits in with Grandmasters because you get it out of Grandmasters. Now, like I said, this is just the adept version of it. You can't get regular versions of it out of doing regular Nightfalls. You can farm that. The only difference is that they will not be able to put on the Adept mods. I've currently got the Adept Big One spec on there, but once you get an Adept version of it, it's even better. So go ahead and pick yourself up one. It is an excellent, solid, all-around scout rifle, and the Hung Jury is just a fan favorite too, and it's got some really good rolls in Destiny too. Alright, next up, we're in the energy weapon slots here. First off, we've got the Le Monarch. This is a Void bow that has intrinsic overload on it. Now, this bow actually causes poison damage when you shoot an enemy as soon as you pull it back and let it go immediately, or you are going to cause poison damage with this. Getting a precision hit when you do that is also going to cause that poison to spread out to other enemies. because of the fact that this has intrinsic overload on it and it damages enemies around it, this makes it an excellent choice for Grandmasters, even if it's not overload for that Grandmaster. But what really makes this shine, and probably makes this the best overload weapon, is that when you're fighting overload champions, once you stun them, they're eventually going to get unstunned. They're then going to be invulnerable to being stunned again. They're going to start healing their health back while they're invulnerable to being stunned again with that overload. The only way to stop them from healing is to continuously attack them with overload too. So you have to keep hitting them even when they are no longer stunned. That's very dangerous to do in a Grandmaster, especially with an overload champion. So basically, you're going to have to expose yourself to danger to keep them from healing. Now, the poison on this will do that for you. The poison on that will damage them and keep them from healing back up. So this is a very good weapon. I'd say this is probably the best weapon for overloads for Grandmasters. And currently, you cannot get this during the quest, or there's no quest to get this right now, so you'll pick this up at the kiosk. Next up, we've got a Trace Rifle. This is the Divinity. You probably heard this one bandied about a lot. This is a very popular, not only a very popular one to use in Grandmasters, but very, very popular to use in most, if not all, raids. Divinity says it's sustained damage with this weapon envelops the target in a field that weakens and stuns him. It's strong against overload champions. This basically makes a giant weak point you can shoot at when you're hitting an enemy with it. It hits them with weaken, it gives them a big weak point you can shoot, and it does stun overload champions. So this is going to be a very popular one to use for overloads. This is probably the second most popular one I see used in Grandmasters, and again is also used in pretty much every single raid out there too to help with boss damage. Now this one actually comes from a raid, and it comes from requests to Divine Fragmentation. If you don't do a lot of raids or you're not used to playing with people, if you want this, you're going to have to do some raids. So, and unfortunately, I still want to get this one. Next up, we've got the Arianas Val. This is another one that has no quest to it. You're going to pick this one up from the kiosk. This is a hand cannon that acts as a sniper rifle. So it zooms in, it does incredible damage, and it runs on special ammo. It takes a while to reload it, so you're definitely going to want to get the catalyst and get that leveled up. Because the catalyst gives it auto-loading and increases its magazine size. It goes from like 6 to 9. This is one, like I said, it has intrinsic anti-barrier. I think 2 shots it takes out a barrier. If you cannot use Wish Ender for some reason, this is a good second weapon to use. Like I said, it can be used as a sniper rifle. It's got great anti-barrier capabilities. I think 2 shots and barriers down. It's not as good as Wish Ender is, but very few things are. So if for some reason you cannot use that Wish Ender, this is a good backup. Next up, we've got the Devil's Ruin Sidearm. This is a sidearm that has intrinsic Unstoppable on it, so it stops unstoppable champions. This is a laser sidearm, so you actually hold down the trigger and let go, and it fires at a laser burst. That laser burst is what has the Unstoppable on it, so make sure you charge that up. This is a very fun one to use. I don't use it a lot myself for Unstops. I usually use whatever the seasonal one is, but if you want to use the laser pistol, this is a good one to have. Alright, next up, we've got 2 legendary weapons to go over. These are somewhat easy to get. First up, we've got the BXR55 Battler. This is just an all-around solid pulse rifle you can have for Grandmasters. This is one you can get out of the Dares of Eternity. You can farm this one for red borders. It's just a good one to have as just kind of a utility weapon. You can use this one to recharge your grenades. It's got incendiary you can put on there. It's just a good workhorse weapon to have. It doesn't have no intrinsic anything on it. It is a legendary weapon, but this is a solid one to have in your secondary slot if you just need a workhorse and you've already got something else for your primary. It's a good one to use when there is a pulse rifle anti-champion mod for the season. It's just another good all-around weapon to use. It is a good distance weapon. You don't have to be close for it. Again, Grandmasters, you want to stay far away. This is a good distance weapon for it. It's also got some excellent perks on it, and you typically have a lot of good seller options on the artifact mods for the season, so that should work with this as well. The other one is going to be the Falcoweb submachine gun. This is one you can get off of Banshee 44. You can kind of farm some perks or farm some rolls off of him. This is, again, not going to have any kind of intrinsic on it. It is a legendary weapon. This is the one that is a submachine gun, so you're going to be a little bit closer. You can try to find one that's got a rangefinder on it. This one has got Subsistence and Frenzy. Well, this is going to be another good workhorse weapon for you. You're going to be a little bit closer with this one, but this is going to be very good to help you burn down those red borders. This will be great for any kind of wood build, especially if you've got Devourer on. So this is a very good option to use both in Grandmasters and outside of it. I've used this one for quite a few Grandmasters myself. You see I've got 13,000 plus kills on it, so I've got quite a bit of time with this particular Falcoweb. So it's a very good, solid weapon to use for that secondary slot. Alright, for our heavy slot, our first one is going to be the Lathans Breath. Now this is one that's going to have intrinsic unstoppable on it. This is one that was not very good when it first came out. In fact, it was kind of a meme weapon. People really just kind of use this one just to mess around, or they would just do builds where they use nothing but bows. This was not a very great weapon when it came out. It did get a rework. It got the unstop added to it. It got quite a bit of damage, and it's got a catalyst now too. I would use a lot of other weapons before I would use this for Unstoppable for a Grand Masters, but if you wanted to use it, it would not necessarily be a bad weapon. It can do great boss damage, it can do great damage against champions, and it does have that intrinsic unstop on it. There's just other weapons I would personally use over this one. But if you do want to get this one, you can pick this one up at the kiosk. Now, next up is probably going to be the hardest one to get, especially if you got really bad RNG. It's going to be the Eyes of Tomorrow. Now, this does not have any intrinsic perks on it, and it's not necessarily going to be great for most Grand Masters. However, for those that have a lot of enemies, a lot of small enemies, these Eyes of Tomorrow are going to be very good to use, especially in something like Corrupted. Now, what happens is, if this weapon kills multiple enemies with the barrage it does, increases damage of the next volley and refunds ammunition. So killing 4 enemies with this volley is going to give you your rocket back. For Grand Masters where there's a lot of small enemies, the Eyes of Tomorrow is actually coming really clutch for me. I can think of a couple. The Corrupted is one big one. It's one of the harder ones to do. So this is a good one where you can not only take out a lot of enemies, but it gives you your ammunition back. Now, this is one that's going to come out of Deepstone Crypt. It is a random drop when you beat the raid. So this one is going to be completely dependent on your RNG. You cannot buy from a kiosk. There is no quest for this one. So this one's going to be pretty hard to get if you got bad RNG. And again, if you don't do a lot of raids either, if you don't do any, you're not going to be able to get your hands on this weapon. But for those of you that do, the Eyes of Tomorrow does have some pretty niche uses. If you're fighting any kind of open area, there are a couple. The Devil's Lair is one. Like I said, Corrupted is another. Those times where there are a lot of small enemies you can lock onto, take them out, and get your free ammo back. Now, next up, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the Galah Horn, probably the most popular weapon in Destiny and Destiny 2's history. This one comes out of the Outfly the Wolves quest. I believe this is associated with the dungeon. This is going to be another good one just because it can take out massive amounts of enemies in one shot. That one rocket will explode and then a lot more smaller rockets will come out and hit other enemies. If you're ever doing any kind of mission where, again, there's a lot of small enemies, you need to clear a bunch of ads, one of these will pretty much clear all your ads for you. I think Birthplace of the Vile is one where I use this in a boss room. I use it just for clearing ads, so we did not have any problems taking out the boss afterwards because the ads were clear. It's going to be a very good one just to pump out damage and to clear ads. It's going to be a very good workhorse, but again, it's going to be relying on heavy ammo. Not necessarily a bad thing. If you got 1 or 2 of these on your team and you're having trouble on any kind of Grandmaster, a lot of ads, you will not go wrong with a Galah Horn. Just again, remember that this does not have any kind of intrinsic anything on it. It's just pure damage. And finally, as far as legendaries for the heavy slot, the only other one I can really think of that I would use for the heavy a lot for Grandmasters is going to be the Hothead, especially in something like the Lightblade where there is Arc Burn. It's a very solid rocket launcher. Again, this is the one that comes out of Grandmasters. You can get the non-adept version and regular Nightfalls. Again, I've got the adept version, so I've got the adept big one spec on there, but you can get a regular version of this, like I said, just doing Nightfalls. The one I've got has got tracking module on it and clown cartridge, so I always load up 2 tracking rockets on it. It's a very good one for any kind of any kind of arc burn. It's going to hit very hard, and it's going to be a very good option for any of those that have arc burn on it, especially during the Lightblade Grandmaster. And that's it, guys. That is all the weapons I have to go over for you today. Again, there are other weapons I have seen in Grandmasters. There are other weapons that have intrinsic anti-champion mods on them. There are even some armor pieces that have anti-champion mods on them. However, those are typically not going to be ones that you're going to see a lot, and they're not going to be ones that are used a lot. Most of the weapons that are on this list have multiple functions they can do, or they just hit really, really hard, or they just happen to be really, really popular. For example, a lot of the anti-barrier weapons that are out there won't take out an anti-barrier, or won't take out a barrier champion shield in one hit. It might take 2 or 3 hits. Again, there are a lot of legendary weapons. Obviously, most weapons in the game are legendary, but there are some you're going to see more often than others. You're not going to see a lot of legendary weapons you use that are just kind of world drops. You're typically going to see ones that are going to come out of Grandmasters that are going to come out of raids, just because of the fact that they will roll with different perks that the ones that come out of the world drops are just not going to have. So that being said, before I go, like with every video, I'm showing off what my fashion is, so let's go ahead and hop in here. Right now, I'm just being real lazy. I've got Atmospheric Glow on everything. I've got on the Omnioculus Mask with Thunderhead Grips for my gloves. I've got on the Leering Marrow for my Omnioculus. It is the ornament from the Omnioculus. There's one with the 5 here, the 5 eyeballs there. I've also got on my Thunderhead Strides and the Aspiring Challenger Cloak, which, since the Omnioculus does not have a hood on it, putting on the Aspiring Challenger Cloak, which is just a hood, I basically got a hunter with no hood and no cloak here, so that's how I'm doing that. So that is the fashion for this one. Again, I'm using the Atmospheric Glow shader on everything. Alright, and that's going to do it for today, guys. Again, this was just a small list of some of the weapons you can use. These are some of the most popular weapons that are used in Grandmasters. If you're starting off your Grandmasters and you're not sure what weapons to use, depending on what champions are available, you can't go wrong with the Wishender and you can't go wrong with the La Monarch. So, depending on what champions are in the Grandmaster you're starting off with, one of those 2 weapons as your base, and then whatever seasonal artifact weapons are after that. But these 2 weapons right here will not only give you infinite, will have infinite ammo, but they're going to pump out a lot of damage. They're going to be very helpful for taking on whatever it is you're doing. And then you can build the other weapons based off of that. So use those 2 as your base. So that'll do it for today, guys. Thank you all for coming by, and I will see you on our next video.